Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I just watched the Marvel movie Thor: Love and Thunder, and it's a bad movie. Like it's a bad movie on lots of levels, but it crosses the line so much in terms of truther land, in terms of just creepy stuff with children, human sacrifice, and I'll get into all of it. It has a cast of A-list celebrities, like about 20 of them make an appearance in there. And it just takes suck to another level. And so, spoiler alerts, it's just, I'm going to say everything that happens in regards to the clips that I pulled. But the first clip is the actor Christian Bale who plays the villain. And it starts off with him and his daughter, who are the last of a number of worshippers of a god, and his daughter dies, and he comes to an oasis, and he meets the god. And from the trailer, which I watched, I don't know, last year sometime, it is known that he is somebody who is killing all the gods, and Thor's one of them that he wants to kill, but he wants to kill all of them. And so I knew this interaction wasn't going to go well. And so it starts off with this here.
Now your meaningless life finally does have a purpose. To sacrifice yourself to me.
So the guy looks like Ra, and also a combination of Ra and the capstone of the pyramid. The capstone of the pyramid on the dollar bill. And human sacrifice, like his daughter dies, and that's a sacrifice to where he is given all this power. He picks up this sword that it's like a demon sludge sword, and it gives him the power to kill gods. And he picks up the sword and he kills this god. But so there's a sacrifice of his daughter, and then this guy wants to sacrifice him. And it's not the first time they're going to mention human sacrifice, or there's some aspect of human sacrifice in the movie, because multiple people are sacrificed.
Giant goats!
Oh, look at those! They are wonderful. Oh, look at that! Those things are beautiful.
So then Thor receives giant goats for destroying a temple of people who didn't want him to destroy the temple. They're giant Baphomet goats. And not only are they, Baphomet goats, but they're annoying as F. They make these loud sounds throughout. Right?
You moved on quick, didn't you? You're some piece of work.
So Thor's hammer, he spoke to his hammer and said to his hammer some years back that he wanted the hammer to protect his girlfriend, Jane Foster. And so she's dying of cancer. She has stage 4 cancer, and she ends up going and visiting the remains of his hammer where it was shattered by his sister, who was some demonic. There's a lot of demonic stuff in the Thor movies. In Ragnarok, it starts off with him being in hell, and his dad is Odin has one Illuminati eye, played by the guy who played in Silence of the Lambs, that British actor, whatever his name is, Anthony Hopkins. And so he has these conversations with not only his hammer, but also his new axe that was forged for him in the Infinity Wars movie.
Listen, we good? Yeah? I mean, I know it's a little weird having my ex-weapon around, but come on, Mjolnir in the past.
It's bizarre on lots of levels. It's just the weird relationship with his weapons, and what the metaphor of Jane Foster's ex-girlfriend stealing his weapon and his manhood. I'll show you that in a bit. I'm going to talk about this quite extensively at the end of the video, right? But it's a very weird conversation dynamic because Captain America was using it. He didn't have a problem with Captain America using his hammer, which he in the Endgame movie, and the two weapons were there, and neither one of them had an issue. I mean, they were like even, personification of the weapons, right? Just weird. The whole movie's weird. And I'll get into that too. My son and I were talking about it, and he had heard all these things. So I want to get into that at the end. I just want to get through these clips.
If you don't mind keeping the sink thing under wraps.
I got you.
Okay, so that was really lame. When they high-five each other with their weapons. This is the Valkyrie character, who was the last of the Valkyrie. And she is played by Tessa Thompson. And apparently she's also the king, which I'll show you in a second. But this idea of the Jane Foster taking Thor's manhood, his hammer, and then them high-fiving with her having the sword. And you see there's an Illuminati eye there why she does it. And there's a lot of feminist stuff. I'm not going to get into all of it in the clips, but I'm going to talk about it extensively at the end.
It's my plan.
What about, kinging and stuff?
I love being king.
So there's another movie out called The Woman King. There's a new thing now. Women are kings instead of queens. I mean, Queen just died, right? I get into Dom Lemons here, too, with reparations. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to cover here. And there's more clips coming.
Threatens our kingdom.
So this is supposed to be based in a true story. And the way that the trailer is, and the movie's been released, and I don't know if there's sort of a bait and switch here, because what I read was that the woman army that they're going to show you here in a moment was used against other African tribes. It didn't say anything about fighting off the slave traders.
But we have a weapon.
The weapons is the balls to pull this off, lady.
Because no one thinks we have the balls to pull this off.
This is from TriStar that ironically uses the Pegasus, which is what the Valkyrie ride in the, Thor movie.
My king, the Europeans wish to conquer us.
And they did, right? I mean, in a brutal way that I condemn all the time. And I'm not a part of it, right? My genetic line isn't a part of this, but even if they were, I'm not a part of it. But the British and the Europeans conquered Africa because they had superior weapons and whatever else, right? Military training or whatever. I mean, it wasn't like they were, better in some other way. They weren't more spiritual. They certainly weren't nice people. And they were, greedy and all the rest of it. But they had superior weapons and a superior, whatever it was, a system of domination, and they conquered a good portion of the world. And that's where we are now. We're going to get back to this with Dom Lemons, too, in a bit.
They will not stop until the whole of Africa is theirs.
Based on powerful events, based on powerful true events. How is this powerful, right? I mean, the power is in the winning. That's the way that, this is a Western European mentality, that winning and victory and things. And this is a British mantra, right? Like, this is just trying to rearrange history and make the losers, like white men and women and people of color and people on the LGBTQ spectrum, all are the victors, right? It's not changing anything. You're not changing the system or the dynamics or the orientation or the mentality, right? It's about domination. It's who gets to call themselves the king.
Choice. Fight or we die.
Female warriors. We
are the homie!
The woman king. So there's a lot there. When I saw this trailer the other day, I said, oh, man. Right? First of all, kings are men, women are queens. But now they're trying to reverse that, where women are kings and men are queens. I mean, that's what you hear all the time. And it doesn't matter because kings and queens are all evil, because it's all racist. I've said it so many times. I'm surprised other people don't pick up on this, right? Being a king or queen means that you're born to rule. You're above other people, and other people have to be your subjects, your slaves, your servants, right? based in your genetics, which is racist, which is even beyond racism. It means based in your bloodline, you are superior to other people, and those other people are supposed to serve you. It's not based in merit. It's not based in what you've accomplished. It's based in what your ancestors have accomplished. Your ancestors were able to conquer. And we saw this with the royal family. And all these people call themselves kings and queens. You see it quite often in the African American community. LeBron James and Beyonce. Of course, Britney Spears, they call her queen. You're not kings and queens. And it's a good thing, right? It's a good thing that you're not kings and queens, because kings and queens are not good people. Maybe, there's a good king here or a good queen there, but the majority of them are not good people. And the system itself is warped and abusive. And so there's that. But then there's the woman warrior part, which again, there's all this emphasis of taking things away from men. Men have a few things that they do better than women. Some things, physical strength is one of them, but they're going to take that away, right? And for what? Because being a warrior is being violent, right? You're defending yourself, sure. But other than that, it's a form of violence. It's, armies and wars have caused so much pain and suffering. But the way this trailer looks is these women, these African women, are standing up to the white, slave trade. We're going to get into Don Lemons here in a moment. But what about the men? Like, this is also crapping on black men, African men, because the women are the one doing the fighting, right? And, again, with the Thor and the hammer, we're going to get back to Thor. I got a bunch more stuff there. It gets worse. Human sacrifice and stuff with kids and all these things. Let's go to the Don Lemon thing first here. But this idea that men are getting their nuts clipped, right? This is a common theme now in movies. I'm going to cover this quite extensively at the end of this thing. Okay, so I want to talk about this here in regards to both of these movies, Thor, Love and Thunder and The Woman King. And so there was this video that went around. A bunch of people wanted me to cover it and sent it to me because they said this woman just destroys Don Lemons. But I didn't see it that way at all. Don Lemons is always a goof. And I talk about reparations myself in a long video and how there's no way to calculate it. There's no way. There's all kinds of, various ways to look at it. And there's no way that it would ever be something that you can, you can't punish people's ancestors for something that their, forefathers did years ago, because it, doesn't work that way, right? You're not responsible for what your dad or your grandfather or your grandmother, your great-great-grandfather did, right? And that would mean all the children of Hitler would be accountable to, all these people that suffered because of him, right? And so, that's not the way it works. But anyways, let's get into this here.
Those who are asking for reparations for colonialism, and they're wondering, $100 billion, $24 billion here and there, $500 million there. Some people want to be paid back, and members of the public are wondering, why are we suffering when you are, you have all of this vast wealth? Those are legitimate concerns.
Well, I think you're right about reparations in terms of if people want it, though.
She's really unlikable.
What they need to do is you always need to go back to the beginning of a supply chain.
So this woman is named Hillary Fordwich. It's Hillary Fordwich, and she's a royal commentator. And why would she want to go back to the supply chain, right? Like, she's, coming up with these talking points from the firm of the royal family. This person's getting their instructions from the firm, and they've come up with these talking points because they knew where they were going to come, especially to do with Americans, right? That there is a huge amount of wealth that's being transferred to King Charles, and it's wealth that came from abuse, wealth that came from colonialism, wealth that came from the exploitation of other people, right? And she has an argument ready for him, and people don't like Don Lemons in the truth community and on the right. And, even though they don't like the royal family, they can't make this mental leap and understand that this woman is far more evil than Don Lemon.
Where was the beginning of the supply chain? That was in Africa, and across the entire world, when the slavery was taking place, which was the first nation in the world that abolished slavery?
Who was it?
The first nation in the world to abolish it. It was started by William Wilberforce, was the British.
So you want a medal for being the first country to stop slavery? Yeah, we did it, but we stopped before anyone else. We were the first people to stop, right? They have the most blood on their hands of any empire in modern history. The British Empire colonized all these countries and stole their wealth, enslaved their people in different forms. There was still slavery, right? All those servants the British have, that's a form of slavery. There's wage slavery, right? The royal family comes from cannibals and Vlad the Impaler, right? Dracula. Dracula was an ancestor. They don't even come from England. They come from Germany. This family, they're a horror family, and Britain has been a brutal empire, and now America has followed in Britain's footsteps and has become its own evil empire, killing 1 million people in Iraq and all these wars and things like this, right? So for this woman to excuse the British's role in slavery and all of it, all that stuff that happened in Africa, right? I mean, apartheid in South Africa, all the things that the British had a hand in, all the things they did to the Irish, all the things they did to the Scottish, all the things they did to all these other countries that they conquered around the world, Australia, and of course America, the indigenous people here, And for her to come out and said, you know what? I want a medal. Can you put a medal, or do you want a chest to pin it on, right? This British, and people are celebrating her like she's a hero of the truth community. She's not. Reparations are stupid. This is not an excuse here.
In Great Britain, they abolished slavery. 2,000 naval men died on the high seas trying to stop slavery. Why? Because the African kings were rounding up their own people. They had them on cages waiting in the beaches. No one was running into Africa to get them. And I think you're totally right. If reparations...
So there was slaves and there was African kings that sold their people. Just like, there's slaves in every culture. Slavery is a big part of human race, right? Animals are slaves. Livestock are a form of slavery, right? Interspecies slavery, it's all these things. And so, she's right about that, but there's no excuse for the British. 2,000 Brits died at the sea because they were heroes. They're always trying to make themselves heroes. This is spin that they say. Your doofus of a king just inherited $32 billion or whatever it is of this empire that's generationally well stolen, and, it's other people's pain and suffering. And there's no way to make it up to them. There's no way to, make that up, right? There's no way to give them reparations. That doesn't mean you get to hold on to it, right?
Need to be paid. We need to go right back to the beginning of that supply chain and say who was rounding up their own people and having them handcuffed in cages. Absolutely, that's where they should start. And maybe, I don't know, the descendants of those families where they died in the high seas trying to stop the slavery, that those families should receive something too, I think.
Oh, should they? You should give more money to the British. The British hasn't taken enough. You're going to wring some more money out of African people and give it to the British, you skank, you British skank, right? And so this rewriting of history that we see in these movies, all this stuff, all this reparation stuff, that's a level of insanity. The Don Lemons people, the woke people, and their delusionary understanding of the way that the universe works, and somehow you're going to punish ancestors, and all white people are somehow on the hook for a small segment of the people who were slave owners. And like I said before, many of the black people today, people who are considered African American, have blood of slave owners in their system, in their genetic line, right? They are, descendants of slave masters, because like all of Thomas Jefferson's, when he was, statutory R-ing Sally Hemings, his slave girl who was 15 years old, and she bore him 3 kids who became his slaves. The kids of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings had both African-American slave genetics and slave owner and Thomas Jefferson genetics in their system, right? And so, it's somebody who has both of those things in their genetic line. Many people have that. But anyways, it's just the rewriting of history and all this goofiness. And the British should never get off the hook for what they did, and they won't. In terms of the country at some point will be destroyed, just like every other country. And, its memories forgotten. But, they did so much in terms of the exploitation of other people.
Those families should receive something too, I think, at the same time.
It's an interesting discussion, Hillary. Thank you.
That's the part. It's an interesting discussion. Don Lemons is such an intellectual midget. Watching this back. So I started this video 2 days ago. And, it took me 2 days to watch the Thor thing. And then, anyways, this woman, Hillary Scandwich, what was it? Hillary Fladwich? Hillary Fordwich. Her arguments, and Don Lemon just let her get away with this, which shows you how, strong his intellectual capacity is. He brought up reparations, and she just, worked the guy, right? But her arguments were this, that the people on the supply chain are responsible, the people who sold their people into slavery, because the British wouldn't have taken slaves, but, there were some on the market, right? Being a slave owner is not, it's like being a crackhead who gets addicted. It's the crack dealer that's always worse, right? No, it's the supply chain issue. If they weren't offering slaves, we would never have taken them. We're not like that. We're the British, hey, if there's slaves available, sure, I don't know, hey, like they owned slaves, and they continue, now the people have to bow before the king. They had to bow before the queen. And this is where it ties into the whole Thor thing and these gods, right? It's more than being, the queen had the orb that she was God's representative on earth, making her a god, right? And so this is where they're bowing before them. These servants and people around them, the king had a guy who used to wipe his butt, right? Like there's, and they're at their beck and call. They just sit around waiting for the king or the queen to call them, or any number of the royal people, the princes and the dukes and all these people. You see it in the Downton Abbey show. There's an upstairs and a downstairs, and the downstairs staff can't, they don't have the right to speak up, and they can't talk back to them. They can't, you see the way that they get treated. And so, yeah, they're getting paid, but, even all these subjects in Britain can't speak up, and they can't, they're all supposed to bow before the queen and all these things, right? All of it. And they all get money extracted from their work, their labor. And so they get paid, and then their collective money gets taken back in the form of taxes, and then goes back to the royal family. Think about how evil that all is, right? And the British, this woman's like, well, it's a supply chain issue. If they wanted slaves in England, what are we going to do? They put them on the market, right? Anyways, we had 2,000 guys that died at sea trying to fight the evil of slavery because we were the first to stop owning slaves. So we should get some money. That was her argument, and Don Lemons let her get away with it. But anyways, let's get back into the Thor thing here.
We will return with children, many children.
So this was really strange where this is going to end up, because the guy with the god-killing sword captured all the children of Asgard, and so Thor and his crew are going to rescue them, and he's given this speech for no real apparent reason, because the people that he's rallying, this is like a war speech to get everyone pumped up, and they're staying behind, so it's kind of stupid. There's a lot of stupid stuff in the movie. Really horrible movie. But then it takes a really weird turn.
And then we shall feast. Hold on, the children. Do not do that anymore. Those were dark times. Shameful times.
What? So you're admitting that you and your people, certainly your royal family, used to eat children. So you've just said that. like as a joke, that you guys used to eat children, but you don't do that anymore. Much like the royal family and the queen, right? And, her admitting that her family was cannibals, but they're saying that they feasted on children. And so, like, why are you doing, like, what? And the depravity continues, and Thor goes to meet Zeus.
Okay, we should go.
Oh, yeah, I forgot this part. It's powered by Baphomet. So they're going on a ship that's being pulled by two Baphomet-looking goat MNFers, right? Another tie to the queen. Remember, they had that goat in the goats in her procession with Charles joking with them. So Thor admits that they used to eat children, feast on them, and then he takes off in a ship powered by Baphomet, a couple of Baphomets.
Where are we going to hold this year's orgy?
So that's a Russell Crowe, an overweight Russell Crowe playing Zeus. And he's got some kind of weird accent. I don't know if that's supposed to be Greek or what, right? But he's talking about orgies. Like that's, his big obsession here. He says it again later.
So now we're going to announce the winner of the most human souls sacrificed in the name of a god.
So Zeus, who's Thor's hero, he talks about how Zeus inspired him. And Zeus is talking about orgies, and then he talks about they have a contest to the god who has the most human souls sacrificed to them.
Shut up. You be quiet, because you are this close to being uninvited to the orgy.
So Zeus says Thor's talking back, so he's threatening to not let him come to the orgy.
You cannot come to the orgy.
And Thor continues to talk back, so he takes away his orgy privileges.
Anything goes here in Omnipotent City.
Anything goes in Omnipotent City, right? And so let's see Zeus's greatest hits here.
Human souls sacrificed in the name of a god. Where are we going to hold this year's orgy? Shut up. You be quiet, because you are this close to being uninvited to the orgy. You cannot come to the orgy. Anything goes here in Omnipotent City.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Zeus. He'll be here all week. This is Russell Crowe playing Zeus here. And so Thor, who's hero, this is Thor's hero, right? And kids are watching this. Like the majority of people who watch superhero movies. I mean, it's, these things are widely viewed, but kids watch them. I mean, these movies are in many ways for kids. Comic books are for kids. And so, they're watching all this stuff. We heard Thor admit that they used to feast on children. The children get kidnapped by this really sleazy, like just Gollum-like creature. I'm not going to show you that part, but that's like, another level of creep. And then they talking about orgies and human sacrifice twice in the movie. When there's something said 3 times with the orgy, it goes into your subconscious, like they do with the orgy here. He says it 3 times, Zeus does. And so human sacrifice is talked about a couple of times. And of course, the eating of children. And so this is what your kids are watching. And I'm not even, this is just, like I could comb through the whole movie and talk about symbolism and things that are going on. This is just the highlights. I forgot a couple of things. Like I didn't write it down while I was watching it. So there's some things I just forgot about. But it ends up having, a couple of weird things at the end of the movie as well. And so the goats take them to this dark world. It's a small little tiny little planet that's, it's in black and white. Like all the colors of the uniforms and stuff fade. This part of the movie becomes black and white. And these screaming Baphomet goats take this ship over to this, whatever it is, right? This sort of hell-like place. So the Baphomet goats are taking them to hell. Like Rudolph the Red, like the reindeer of Santa Claus' sled. But his axe has the ability to make the biofrost, is the way that they sort of, beam me up Scotty, go from one place to another. And so his axe, like, is going to take the kids home, you know. But somehow the axe is the power behind the ship, but you can't use the biofrost to the dark world. Like, they have to go on this journey where a lot of weird dialogue and stuff happens, but it's like totally unnecessary. And the goats, who don't have the ability to fly, are somehow towing this boat that's being pulled by this magic axe, right? You know?
The power of Thor!
So Thor needs an army, so these kids are there. These Asgardian kids that have been kidnapped by this, God-killing, sword-wielding killer, right? And he gives them all the power of Thor, which looks like this. They all get these demon eyes, right? There's a girl holding up her rabbit. That's the weapon she's going to use to kill the monsters. So here she is wielding her rabbit to kill all these monsters as she goes full demon. And that's going to tie into Jojo Rabbit, which I'll get into in a bit. Like the director of this movie.
Now that my body's grown back, with a dude I met called Dwayne.
So the Korg character, which was introduced in the Ragnarok movie, the Thor movie before this, and was a little bit in the Endgame movie, is voiced by the director, and I'll cover this. I got one more scene to cover and talk about him. He played Hitler in another movie, and I got a whole bunch of stuff on him, right? But the character really goes like, who's that guy? Jar Jar Binks, right? Like, just over the top annoying through the movie. He becomes just a face for a little bit, and there's lots of scenes with him I could have covered, and the Valkyrie character, but it's just he directed a horrible movie. I think he wrote this movie as well.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Go to hell, demon!
This movie ended bizarrely, and I'm going to get back to this in a moment, but there's Thor being domesticated, where Thor has an apron on, he's cooking, he's, being basically a mom to a girl who just sort of showed up, right? He becomes basically a dad without, she calls him uncle, but here she calls him demon, and fires her eternity laser eyes at him. The Korg character is sort of narrating the resolution of the movie.
And his girl born from eternity with the powers of a god.
So this girl is the daughter who died in the beginning of the movie, who's been resurrected by eternity, and I'll explain this in a moment, but she has the power of a god now. So she's a god, even though her dad was killing gods, which we'll get into that in a moment as well. And this is her being homeschooled.
They are simply known as Love and Thunder.
And so it's just bizarre, a bizarre ending. Okay, so I want to talk about this in the voiceover section here, but I need to show you the little clip thing I did on the director. But I just want to note here that at the end of the movie, Thor, a guy who said once that he used to eat children, him and his people, and, the guy is very narcissistic, and, he's all about fighting and war and just, that's about it, really. He doesn't have a female presence in his life now because his girlfriend dies at the end, which I'll explain all these things. Ends up getting this kid, right? His idol is a guy who talks about orgies and child sacrifice and all the stuff to do with gods. And at the end of the movie, he's given a kid, right? Like, that's after watching a movie and you see all the reasons why Thor, not just this movie, but all the movies, wouldn't necessarily make the best dad, is given a kid for no real explainable reason. And I'll get into that when we go to the story. But let's check out the director here. So there's this director named Taki Wadatake. He played Hitler in a movie called Jojo Rabbit. which is interesting because of the rabbit he used in this Thor Love and Thunder. And the girl, the demonic girl holding the rabbit and killing monsters. I used to make all these videos. There was a short period of time where I talked about bunny ears. Macaulay Culkin had some sort of bunny ear thing. And then there was all this stuff to do with bunny ears, of course, going down the rabbit hole, the god Istora, Easter, right? There's so much stuff here. And I'm not going to get into it, but it's a thing, right? And there's a movie called Jojo Rabbit, and he has got this demonic rabbit, this girl going full demon. And so let's just leave that at that.
I had an imaginary friend. Got me in so much trouble.
He also made a movie called Hunt for the Wilder People. Now, this was a kind of bizarre movie. It takes place in New Zealand, where the director is from. Sam Neill, who also plays Thor's father in a play with Matt Damon as Thor's brother. And the actor plays Thor, his biological brother plays Thor in the play, in the movie. And it features this kid wearing this jacket with Illuminati eye on it, right? Is weird. Like I say, had some toys. It's kind of the guy makes quirky movies. But I saw this years ago, and I was like, how's this Illuminati jacket end up on this obese kid in a movie in New Zealand? And here it says, "All eyes on me," and that's what it says underneath the capstone of the pyramid. So I showed you all that because there's so much to talk about in terms of what this means, far more than the symbolic nature, but all of it, right? Again, this is a Disney film, and we know about Disney, right? Disney, Marvel's owned by Disney, all the stuff to do with Disney, and the way that they treat kids, and all the hidden stuff and the symbolic stuff with Disney. But let's start with the beginning and ending of this movie. So the Christian Bale character is a worshiper of gods, or specific god. He's out in the desert with his little daughter who is going to die, and she has almost no role in the movie, has just a few lines, and is going to be resurrected by eternity at the end of the movie, inexplicably, because Christian Bale is going to die, which I'll get into in a moment. But his character is a devotee, a worshiper of God, and the god tries to sacrifice him. He says, "Your only worth is when I sacrifice you." I mean, that's, the way that the movie started. And so there's going to be a human sacrifice to a god who Christian Bale is told there's no eternity, that you guys died for nothing. We just like you guys to worship us because it's cool, right? But we're not going to give you anything. We're not here for you. You're just here to serve us, right? And we already know that these gods, I mean, not just this god, but all of them, because Thor admits to killing babies or eating babies, the gods. And then Zeus is talking about orgies and human sacrifice and all the rest of these things.
And then we shall feast. Out on the children. Do not do that anymore. Those were dark times. Shameful times.
Human souls sacrificed in the name of a god. Where are we going to hold this year's orgy?
Shut up. You be quiet, because you are this close to being uninvited to the orgy.
You cannot come to the orgy.
Anything goes here in Omnipotent City.
So the Christian Bale character then gets the opportunity to kill the gods with the sword, right? So he kills this god with the sword, and he gets the sword, and he becomes the villain. He's the villain of the movie now. And why is that, right? Like these gods and these kings and these queens, people with money, power, billionaires, and the so-called elite, people who have what's called money power in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages from, the Sahaj Marg system of meditation that I do. Talks about money power. And when you have money power, you become a godlike person, right? You can have, buy all kinds of things with your money. And people become billionaires or even trillionaires. They, multimillionaires, it warps them because of this power. And then, of course, the power, political power, and, corporate power, and, royal power, and religious power, religious leaders, the Pope, the religious hierarchy, and things like this. They all get twisted and warped, and they always end up here with the, sacrifices and the bizarre behaviors, right? And, demonic behaviors. And there's, nothing redeeming about any of the gods in this movie. Thor is like one of the better ones, but he's narcissistic. And, if you see the Marvel movies, there's all collateral damage when they have these battles. When these superheroes, these gods go to war, there's always innocent people dying. And people without a speaking part, are just expendable. The average schlub, right? The muggles. And so, why is this guy the villain for killing these demons, right? These beings that don't do anything for the people. And so he's going around killing gods with his sword, and somehow he's, the antagonist because Marvel said so. Marvel Disney, Disney movie, said that this guy's the villain. But why is he the villain? He's killing bad guys, and he was wronged in some way. And I made a recent video where I was talking about how they can make the hero anybody. You can do this with reality TV. You can shape the narrative anyway, any possible way. And you can change parts and roles. They have the hero role and the villain role in reality TV. And the way they edit it, there's a good video that was put out years ago. Somebody did did random footage of reality TV. Like they made their own reality TV show. And then they showed you how they edited it to make one person look like a villain and then make the same person look like a hero. It's just, editing and music and the way they frame the narrative. And, my wife and I were walking around. She's been doing some sort of research on something to do with, TV. And she was talking about how, the TV puts you in the passive alpha consciousness where you're no longer able to make decisions. You get into this hypnotic state, which I've, talked about myself for years. But your body and your limbic system and your emotional system are still experiencing this on a subliminal, subconscious level, which is something that, TV does to you. I mean, I've talked about this also with video games, where you're doing all kinds of physical activity, but you're only moving your thumbs, right? And you're experiencing the adrenaline and the stress and the, it's like you're watching the physical movements, but you're not, your body needs to release that through physical contact, through sports, whatever it is, right? Through doing something physical, but you're only engaged in limited physical expression. And so, you experience what you're watching on a whole different level because your mind can't, your subconscious mind can't differentiate between fact and fiction, lies and truth and things. And so they put these movies out and they frame it like these demons are, Thor's called the demon by this girl who then shoots lasers through her demon eyes, right? And, they frame this, these narratives, but clearly the Christian Bale character isn't the demon. And so at the end of the movie, he uses Thor's axe to get him to eternity, who is a being, again, the first God said that there was no such thing as eternity. But the Christian Bale character uses Thor's axe to get them to eternity, and they destroy his sword, so he's no longer being connected to this demonic sword. And Thor's girlfriend, Jane, is dying, right? And, it's just a weird relationship, and, he's expresses his love for her when she now is a Thor herself, right? Because she's wielding the hammer and she's referred to as a Thor. And so now, she's he's in love with her, but it's like another version of himself, which is the whole weird narcissism thing, right? And Thor says he'll choose love to the guy, and the guy who's going to wish to destroy all gods, which he could have done because he has one wish, instead brings back his daughter as he himself is dying. And so he brings back his daughter, who is like, it isn't like she formed some relationship with Thor, and Thor's dying girlfriend is saying, oh, no, we'll take the kid and raise her. But she's dying anyway, so she's promising for Thor. And so it's a bizarre ending that you would never give a person who said they used to eat children and is, inspired by a god who has all these hedonistic qualities, which I just showed you, all this stuff to do with gods, all of it. A random child he's never met before who was dead and obviously had a soul and was somewhere because, this one god says there's no afterlife, but then they say there's eternity. And so this girl is brought back, and now she has superpowers for some reason. But her dad, who, loved her and, was lamenting her death, is dead anyway. She's got to be raised by this stranger who's, a narcissist at the very best and a demon at the worst. I'm like, what kind of movie is this, right? Like, it makes no sense. I mean, the ending was, the whole movie is crap. Like, besides all this demonic Illuminati child stuff, whatever it is, right? Besides all of that, it's a really poorly made movie. The jokes fall flat. Like, I'd like to see it in a theater. But my son comes downstairs and he looks at it, he goes, oh, you're watching that? My friend said it all sucked. He said, he'd heard, and he didn't, he had given up on these Marvel movies. And I was, I started watching, I'm like, oh, I'm going to make a video about this because right off the bat, there was human sacrifice. And I'd seen the trailer and I was suspicious of it, right? And so when I was a kid, Thor was one of my favorite comic books. I bought Marvel comic books. Of course, I outgrew them. And they started making the Spider-Man movies and they weren't so great. And, I don't know what I saw in terms of Marvel movies. But my kids got into them. And, I used to read the comic books. And especially when we were in India. And the Marvel movies got a lot better. And there was things in there that were, positive. I don't like the Captain America actor or character, but, he was anti-government, like overreach. And there was, things to do with, Illuminati and, these mind control. I mean, they had all these things in the movies that were interesting. And so my kids and I would see these movies when we were in India. And it was a way to connect with the American, culture, and it was a way for me to connect with them. We go out to dinner and go to a mall. Everything's cheaper in India. And it was a thing we do like every week. And a lot of the Marvel movies came out during that time. And, it was something we could talk about and bond over. And then, two of my kids went to live with my ex. And, my kids got older and they, we saw the Marvel movies together, the End Game and stuff. But we were already talking about the feminist aspect and the woke culture stuff that started to infiltrate into the Marvel movies and just made them suck, right? And, whatever was redeeming or good about them, the movies just started to be bad movies. Like they, get into the, the Black Panther and the, and even more so the Captain Marvel movie, which was, the whole Captain Marvel character, and she's really unlikable, the actress, and she was now the most powerful character in the universe, even though it didn't make sense because she got her power from one of the stones where, these other characters had the stones, like had one of the stones, or they were, Thanos had them all at one point, but she was considered this more powerful character because of the feminist aspect. Black Panther was not great. There was a lot of annoying characters in it, but it just was at the beginning of this thing. And then it got worse with Captain Marvel, and then all the movies since and the TV shows, they have rewritten all these things and made it into this woke culture BS, right? I want to get back to the feminist thing in a moment, but it's so contrived and so manipulative. Like, you can see how manipulative it is. And, with this movie, the characters, like the Thor character and the other characters, weren't like they were in other movies. It was like they were different people. Because the guy, he made a really bad movie. And it didn't, it wasn't in sync with all the rest of the movies in the universe. And the new characters and the new shows are even worse. And now they've done this to Thor, who was one of the more likable, sort of redeemable characters in the earlier movies. His movies were lighter, less whatever. And they have this, this music, Sweet Child of Mine, is the theme song for Guns N' Roses, annoying song. I dislike the song, but it's also weird in the context of him getting a child at the end when there's, no reason for that to happen. Like there was no spiritual reason why this would be a good idea, right? And then there's the feminist aspect that I didn't really get into, but it's quite prevalent. My wife and I are watching this alien show, Resident Alien. It's kind of a stupid show. We watched the first season, but it's got some interesting jokes and things. But there was a whole episode that was devoted to feminism and the women in the show. It's a sitcom. It's supposed to be light. It's a goofy sitcom. It's supposed to be like lighthearted. And all the women in the show find out there's pay discrepancies in the government, and they're lecturing all the men about it. And this little girl's lecturing this little boy about it. It's so contrived and off-putting. And I'm like, you see it in all these shows, and it just makes the opposite happen. Like they're not, convincing you. They're mansplaining these things to you, and they're not factually accurate, right? Because there's plenty of things, if you're going to get into the differences between men and women, there are things that suck about men that women have to endure, and there are things that suck about women that men have to endure. Like it's just a thing, right? And to make it one-sided and, all these kind of things, right? All the stuff, the whole, the man bashing and the white man bashing and all these things that go along with this woke culture stuff. And there's truth in it, right? But going back to, the Don Lemon stuff and the Woman as King movie stuff, right? They don't want to get rid of the paradigm. They don't want to get rid of the king, the monarch, the ruler, the money power, these gods. They just want, the people who have been oppressed, they just want to be in that position. They're not, they're not getting rid of the power structure. They're not taking on the controllers. They're not taking on the royal family. They're not taking on, all the, the religious leaders. They're not saying change the paradigm. Because as long as you have a wealth structure where people can be billionaires and other people can be, living on $1 a day, which is, in some ways worse than being a slave, right? Because they can't even take care of their physical needs on that much money. They still have to do slave labor, participate in the system, but they don't even get treated like a slave where they have a place to, live and whatever it is, right? And so, it's just, horrific, the discrepancy between the power dynamics, because money is power and then position is power. And you have that throughout the world, and Americans think they're free, but they're not. It's a whole thing, right? And so the woke culture says they just want to get rid of the demographic that's on top. They want you to lose your privilege, but they don't want to give up their privileges, all these things, right? These various groups. So it isn't like you're saying, all right, let's get rid of kings and, the whole idea of gods and kings and all these things. Let's get rid of it. No, let's just change who is, the demographic. There used to be this idea of the man, right? In the 60s, the man has got me down, right? The idea, and it was a white man, which would be the man that they're talking about, like this, this collective man. But they don't want to get rid of the role or the archetype. They just want to change who the man is, who the, people who make the decisions and run the system. But they want the same abusive power and really want the people who they think have held the power to suffer. But, most white people are poor. The majority of white people in America, white people make up 75% or 70%, something like that, of Americans. And the majority of them are very poor. Poor people living in the city, in ghettos, living in trailer parks, right? People who are, there's so many poor white people that have no real power themselves, right? Maybe, a little bit more power than some other groups in the sense of just being, a bigger voting block, a bigger member of a town or something. So there's, the majority of people that live in a certain area. And so they have that kind of power, but most of them don't have money power. They're uneducated. They're not, think about all the Cubies and these other groups of people. A lot of the Trump supporters, they're just really dumb. They're just, And so people think about, like, all white people as being, the same, which is, a form of racism, right? when you're going to categorize, or at least a form of prejudice. And like all white people aren't responsible for slavery, and every demographic of people around the world has taken slaves. It's been a part of every culture. You go back and you read about the Middle Eastern people, or the history of like African people, or people, indigenous people all around the world. There's slaves as a part of their, and then also human sacrifices and other things, right? They all got into it. It's just that the Europeans won this, battle, like, of domination, right? And so it was all a bunch of people with, there's some people are always better than other people, but there's, people in every group that wreck it. People, bad people, demonic people, twisted people, power-hungry people that wreck it, who, take advantage of the good people. And, there was a battle for control of the evil people, and the Europeans and the British won. And they do bad stuff. They did horrible stuff because whoever won was going to do bad stuff, right? I said the same thing about the presidential election. If Trump won or Biden won, they were, whoever won was going to be in charge of America going out of business sale, because there's no saving the system. There's no saving, the beastly system, the economic system and all the rest of it. And it's a demonic system that brings out the worst in people. And so, people don't want to give up what the system gives to them. That's the problem. And me included. Like, I don't want to give up all the wonderful things the system provides for me in terms of my material life. And it's where, we're habituated. It's become habit for us. It's become something that, it's hard to live without. And that's driving cars. It's water that comes to your house. It's all the, perks and, the grocery stores, all the abundant food and all the, the ability to shop now even online without even leaving your house, and all the things you can get, the tools, right? What a difference a tractor's made. I've worked on, now it's going to be 4 homesteads, building 4 homesteads. And the first 2 were, with very limited tools and money. And it was a grueling, it was toiling, right? It just sucked, and it just was draining. When you have tools and money, you have a tractor or something like this, it's amazing how much more you can do and how much, more you can produce. But all this big farm equipment, like, an individual tractor is, it's expensive, but they have these big giant machines that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? In terms of, to hay your field or to harvest your crop. There's these machines that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're just there, to do like one thing, right? Like to harvest the crop and, all these things, and these massive, factory farms that you can't compete with because of the, but the equipment costs so much money, right? These farmers who, it's a whole thing, right? But getting back to the essential point, there isn't very many people who are willing to give up what they consider their entitlements, their privileges, right? Everyone looks up and says, oh, those people got it made. We should take their stuff. They shouldn't have what they have, which is true, because, it's an effed up system. It's an abusive system, and people have more than they should have, right? More than they deserve, and it's not good for them. But the people who have less aren't going to give what they have to the people who have less than them, right? They want more. Like, almost everybody wants more. More power, more money, more everything. They want to be served, right? It isn't like they want to change the dynamics. They just want to be on top. They don't want to be in the capstone of the pyramid. And that's the downfall of the human race, because the majority of people, they don't want to get rid of the good things, the things that they consider good of the system. They don't want to give those things up, but they want the system to change. This is the fall of the QBs and all these people, and the people on the left, the woke people, because they're not willing to look at the whole system. The whole system sucks and is evil, and it's, twisted, and it's hurting all of us, right? But we're 100% dependent on it. I say it all the time. And we're not going to willingly give anything up, right? We're just not. Like, who's willing to give something up? Very few people in terms of lifestyle. And so it's going to be taken from us. And that's, and that's going to be painful, because when you realize it yourself, and you're an addict and you work towards getting rid of your addiction, It's always better than having it, forced upon you, but not by your choice. But that's what's going to happen. Like this is, just an indication. I mean, look at all these things in this movie. You turn on the news, you watch TV, movies, and the majority of stuff is the documentation of every reason why our system needs to go. And yet, very few people are willing to embrace that or even prepare for it in any way, shape, or form. I mean, so we're really effed, right? We're really screwed. Like it just, we all know it needs to happen, but we're all going to feel cheated and betrayed by God and all these things when it does happen. People, know that we know we suck, but we'll be shocked when it's like, hey, you can no longer suck on this level. And when that happens, people are going to be pissed and, resentful and, hateful and, feeling like victims, but, we're going to get what we deserve, right? And it's because of this top-down system where these, human, fake gods and, these kings and queens and all the people, the bosses and the privilege that just trickles down from there, everybody embracing it and loving their power and their, their perks and their privileges. Instead of being grateful for what we have, we always want more, right? And, what other people have, right? Well, why does that guy get that much? I only got this much. And so that's, when the system collapses, that's why. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, Death Reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.